Metro 2033 is a game based on a 2002 book of the same name, developed by 4A Games and launched recently. Wait a minute. 2010? Does this mean we're finally done talking about new games in this godforsaken channel? No, no, of course not. But I needed a quick distraction until Doom releases, so here you go. This game ruined my life! A lot happened in 2013. The PS4 launched alongside whatever this is, GTA 5 and The Last of Us hit the shelves, and US President Donald Trump finally let the intrusive thoughts take over. The few survivors of this, shall we call it, oopsie, happened to be in the Metro system when it all went off, and were forced to effectively recreate human civilization, foraging on an assortment of mushrooms, dogs with big snouts, and dogs with even bigger snouts. They were able to create a full-scale economy based on trading with the few goods they had access to down there, using the only currency that would make sense under the circumstances: cold, hard lead. Come on, you are just inviting inflation at that point. Did you not learn anything from us? Long story short, the people of the Metro succeeded in their task of creating a stable society where everyone, Nazis, communists, capitalists, and centrists alike, lived together in peace. The end. So a war broke off, and then another war, and a few more for good measure, as well as a full-blown nuclear attack to top it all off. Take that, immigrants. The first thing you may think of is, this is just Fallout in Russia, and you would be wrong actually. Because for one, you don't play as a side character in the story of someone far more important than you. And also, the proverbial vault is actually more inviting than the outside. The events of Stalker 4 Shadow of Gu-Noble take place in the damp, cold, dirty boots of Artium, a 20-year-old who for some reason looked like this 20 years ago. They grow up so quickly. Seriously though, I'm glad they at least retconned Artyom's age in Exodus, because it makes no sense whatsoever in the original game. Artyom's home station, exhibition, or VDNK for short, is under attack by a mysterious species known as the Dark Ones. Nightmarish in appearance, the Dark Ones are able to take down whole squads of men without the latter ever firing a shot, simply through the monumental amounts of brainrot they induce on their victims. Absolutely despicable. A member of the Order of Gigachads, Hunter, friend of Artyom's adoptive dad, goes to track them and gives Artyom the task of going to Polis, the capital of the Metro, in order to get in contact with the Order and tell them what happened in case he doesn't return. Leaving his dog tags behind, Hunter disappears into the darkness in slow motion. The journey of Artyom begins the next day, when he takes a caravan of humanitarian aid headed for Riga, a neighboring station, under the false pretense that he is acting as a guard, but in reality not intending to return anytime soon. Before we do that though, we need to get ourselves introduced to the greatest enemy of God's creation: metal pipes and duct tape, awkwardly put together into something resembling a gun, I think. Metro 2033 offers a wide variety of weapons, from the aforementioned glorified slingshot to genuine military equipment, as well as war crimes. Ah yes, just like the dear leader likes it. An interesting addition are the pneumatic rifles, which are stealthy, semi-automatic and surprisingly powerful, but need to be pumped to keep their strength up. Almost all of these instruments are upgradable with extended mags, chokers, holographic sights, silencers and night vision. To top it all off, you can carry up to 4 kinds of throwables, from knives to explosives, as well as 3 different guns at once. So you might be wondering, with enough theoretical firepower to kill God, how does this game keep its weapons balanced? It doesn't. At first you are restricted to the basic guns you can find and are drip-fed ammo like a little baby bird, but once you go through some of the optional exploration zones and gain access to the silenced pistol with night vision, it's pretty much over. Supposedly, the silencer increases damage drop-off, but that doesn't stop this little bastard from being a one-hit kill hit-scan sniper rifle, with abundant ammo and no need to massage it every 10 seconds. The other 2 slots are reserved for Gary and Kyle, one of which is an AK with extended mags and hollow sight, and the other a semi-automatic shotgun with extended barrel. If you're wondering why I gave 2 inanimate objects proper names, it's because I found no reason to ever exchange them, but only add enough tactical attachments to make the average Floridian cream their cargo shorts. In theory, you should be swapping weapons often depending on the kind of ammo you find on the field, but the reality is that if you have the slightest amount of situational awareness and have better aim than the average 95-year-old, you will never have an ammo problem. By the end I was practically swimming in it in fact, with over 600 military-grade bullets, 3 of which are usually enough to kill a watchman. Not that you'd need this ammo anyway because of the fully automatic chain shotgun you'd be wielding by then, but the fact that even with that hog I wasn't having an ammo problem says it all. You see, this is supposed to be a survival game, where none of your resources should be taken for granted. Abundance should be the furthest thing from a player's grasp, and yet it accompanies you for most of the game. You might say that ammo security is a reward for the exploring players, but they went too far with this one. Players who scavenge should be rewarded, but the size of their reward should not be enough that it takes away the tension from otherwise terrifying encounters. Keep in mind that I initially directed this criticism towards the standard difficulties, which allow you to keep 3 weapons and have very high ammo caps for each one. The Ranger modes, on the other hand, which came out after the game's initial launch, only allow you to have 2 guns at a time, and the ammo cap for each one of them is halved. So in theory, the ammo problem should be fixed, right? No, because the Ranger difficulties also significantly decrease enemy health, meaning you need less ammo in the first place. So the ammo problem still persisted, even though I was taking the same exact routes as I did before. The only extra thing I needed to do is switch weapon types more often, which prevented me from having Gary or Kyle this time around. So all in all, the biggest difference the Ranger modes made was the complete lack of a HUD, which forced me to spam E in every corridor just in case there was some hidden loot. The problem of ammo could be solved by some kind of dynamic reward system, where the game calculates the value of each ammo pickup depending on how much you already have. This would keep the atmosphere much more intact, while not allowing the players who engage with the world to feel like they got nothing for their efforts. I'm not pretending this situation would be easy to implement, or that it would be perfect in every way, but you should not be allowed to turn a thematically important horror segment into another shooting gallery, just because you feel like it. While you're in the armory, you also receive a hand-powered battery charger, which is going to be vital for your flashlight, and a gas mask, the use of which we'll be talking about later. The staple of the Metro series is the physicalizing of, well, everything. The time left on your filters is represented in your wristwatch. Your visibility is measured by a suspiciously binary LED, and your battery charge is represented by a needle in your charger, as well as an audio cue when it's about to run out. Your objectives are marked in a physical notepad, and so is your target direction. For most people, these will be nice touches, but for those playing in Ranger mode, these pieces of information are absolutely necessary. Since you have no timer on your HUD, you need to rely on your watch to see how much time you have to fuck around. No ammo counter means that you have to rely on your journal, and since the Holy Spirit doesn't tell you how much battery you have, you're off to check with your charger. This constant flow of interaction with objects not only brings about more immersion, but it presents an interesting balancing act, where you have to pick the right moment to check your inventory or swap your filters, lest you be punished for it. For this reason alone, I recommend you try out the Ranger Hardcore mode, but only if you already beat the game recently, since QuickTime events are not marked on your screen at all, resulting in you thinking it was a cutscene when in fact the game expected an input. Since I embarrassingly failed a few times even though I replayed the game back to back to do research for this video. Just play the next part, okay? So, if you remember, we last saw Artium getting ready to leave his home station for Riga. There is not much else we can do here except interrupt some copulation and say goodbye to our stepdad. The final conversation with Sukhoi is especially touching if you read the book, because it recounts in detail how Sukhoi was able to rescue Artyom, and only him, from a dreadful rat infestation befalling Artyom's former station. Sukhoi is portrayed as overprotective, never taking his adopted son on any of his ventures outside of the station, but always sharing stories once he returned. Artyom, on the other hand, is a dreamer. He longs for the outside and cannot bear the weight of being constrained to the same place for years, which is nicely portrayed by his extensive collection of pictures of the old world landmarks as well as books, including a very special one. I'm sure this joke will never get old, by the way. So you can imagine why Artyom would be so eager to take on a potentially lethal task given by someone he barely knows. This is the first and last time you get to interact with Sukhoi in the entire trilogy, and it's completely optional. You can just walk past his room and leave. If you are a monster who doesn't deserve the light of heaven, the way to Riga turns out to be blocked, and the crew reluctantly accepts to take an alternative tunnel, where they are psychically attacked by the Dark Ones. Artium, being the only one who remains relatively unaffected for some reason, manages to wake his mates up in time to fend off an Ozalis attack. After a two-sided bloodbath, they finally make it to the station. And since we are here, we might as well talk about the pinnacle of the Metro games, the stations. As you probably already guessed by my terrible intro, the Metro games are dark, both narratively and literally. Everything is out to kill you. The living, the not so dead, the environment, even the air wants a piece. The few exceptions to this constant assault are the stations, which are centers of life and trade, bustling with activity unless they aren't. These are the few areas where you aren't allowed a gun either, focusing instead on a more calm kind of exploration. Listening to stories and observing the terrifying children's drawings. Kids nowadays, am I right? I'm sure it's just a phase. You even get some catharsis from time to time.
You never even held a gun.
You can appropriate some money here and there and use it to buy some ammo, weapon attachments, filters, and so on. You can even use it for... Oh, hello.
Now, close your eyes.
You are lured in with this false sense of security when all of a sudden something like this happens. And you get no mercy either. You lose every last penny you had until you made it here. And to add insult to injury, you get made fun of as well.
Dumbass! Everyone knows not to go with Nikki. Raz really packs a punch, no?
If you fell for it, like I did, for research purposes of course, you will never forget this incident. And even though it's a trick the game pulls only once in a specific way, it does a good job at driving home the point. The Metro is not safe. Even outside of the proverbial jungle, in the warm and inviting stations, life is tough and never to be taken for granted. Often you come across stations which are fighting for their continued existence, and ones that already lost, which makes you appreciate the few relatively stable ones even more. Speaking of stable, this is Bourbon. He's a smuggler who learned about the cruise incident and Artyom's uncanny ability to resist psychic influence. Anticipating some use for these abilities, he offers the two travel together, and since Riga is in lockdown, Artyom reluctantly agrees. Or at least I assume he does. He is not really the talkative type in this one. Bourbon is pragmatic. He doesn't concern himself with philosophy or abstract thinking or any of that soy shit. He deals with cold, hard facts, like a true gigachad. And like a true gigachad, he ends up with a lung full of iron. Before that though, he teaches you about the stealth mechanics, like the quote-unquote alarm systems, the fact that glass makes noise, and tripwires, which always catch me about 3 to 4 times per playthrough at minimum, because of how well placed they are. I would say I hate traps in this game, but that would be redundant, because that's the point. You hate the traps, so you stay on your toes for the entirety of the game, especially in darker sections. In fact, they are pretty much the only reason why I've never felt like I've conquered this game, despite playing so much of it. There is nothing quite like hearing a string break and barely realize what happened before... So, after going through these basics, you are put up against your first stealth section, or if you didn't grab the pneumatic gun before this part, your first test of sanity. A group of bandits have ambushed a caravan and are sharing the spoils. Unfortunately, they are in your way. Encounters like this are frequent in the game. You are typically put up against a few roomfuls of enemies, and the game gives you a choice in how to approach the situation. Generally, there are 3 options. Sneak past, clean up the camp stealthily, or die. Basically, you just don't want to be spotted. The enemies are lethal in close quarters, and unless you plan your approach, you risk getting caught in an unwinnable situation, which combined with no regenerating health can rapidly spell doom for you. Not to mention that the bullets are, at least in theory, pretty scarce, so a single ball bearing will be much more efficient than a dozen assault rifle rounds. Combine all of this with the mechanics of a brightness meter and the ability to turn off light sources at will, as well as the inherently dark setting of the game, and you have a lot of incentive to use stealth when possible, with the all-out guns blazing approach typically being a sort of last resort. Even when you do decide to go in all pacifist though, a silenced weapon never hurts, as you can turn off light sources from a distance, potentially alerting your enemies that something is wrong, which doesn't happen when you turn it off by hand. This creates an interesting risk-reward dynamic, when you can risk more in order to remain completely undetected or potentially arouse enemy suspicion while still remaining unseen. On the other hand, this can be turned against your enemies as well, by intentionally shooting a light to lure them into a dark corner when you can take them down. Speaking of takedowns, there are two types of them, a lethal and a non-lethal one. This is typical of stealth games, though there is no practical difference in choosing either one. In other games like Metal Gear Solid 5, enemies left alive will eventually wake up, potentially alerting the camp to your presence. Such a mechanic doesn't exist here, unfortunately, and the only reason someone would choose one way of takedown over the other would be if they already knew that it affects the ending, or to roleplay as a more book-accurate version of Artium, I suppose. However, I would like this meta-reasoning to be at least supplemented by something more meaty by the game itself. Pacifist players are subject to a different type of challenge. They are expected to explore in the dark, or in the green, to find the most unguarded way to their destination. This usually amounts to looking around a bit until you find the path that is obviously just there for you, conveniently unguarded and unlit, which does make the game feel slightly artificial to some extent, but also means that subsequent playthroughs can look very different to one another. But on the other hand, it means that you won't have access to the ammo and resources that you would have otherwise looted had you taken down most of the enemies. Unlike the aforementioned lethal versus non-lethal takedown, this actually creates an interesting dilemma. You can do what amounts to skipping the level, but you would also skip a lot of the rewards for beating it in a more traditional way. Oh, and by the way, the crouching button is tied to the holding down the control key as opposed to just pressing it, which can make controlling Artium a bit awkward when you are doing something else with your keyboard hand. The pacifist route is made much more difficult thanks to the tight placement of enemies in later levels, as well as their superhuman senses, which at times go way too far for the challenge of stealth to be enjoyable. You'd expect to be far harder to detect in the middle of a storm, but somehow the enemies know exactly where you are if you shoot their spotlight from 200 meters away. Add to this the seemingly pathological obsession enemies have to target you, and you can be put in a position where in the moment you fire a shot, both monsters and people will stop their squabbles immediately to compete who will one-shot you first.
What'd I do?
My point about superhuman senses is much clearer here, because this group of enemies seemingly activates aimbot the moment they hear a throwing knife, even though, as I said, we're in the middle of a storm here. After I gave up on my quiet approach for that part, I found out that my gun would wobble periodically due to the strong winds, an effect that didn't seem to affect my enemies, who could easily snipe me from substantial distances anyway. You may say that these are small issues, but they're amplified tenfold in the Ranger hardcore mode, where a singular lapse in fairness can set you back a few minutes at a time. If you like the killing to be stealthier though, the game easily accommodates. A bit too easily for my taste, I have to say. As I mentioned before, the silenced pistol is an absolute god tier weapon in any distance and against any human enemy. No matter how much armor they have, one good shot with this and they are done. Pneumatic weapons like the Helsing and the Tikar simply cannot compete. They are less accurate, have scarcer ammo and need to pump up every few hits, disadvantages which neither a silenced pistol or AK has. This not only makes the pneumatic weapons pretty much useless until you get to Exodus, but makes a stealthy and deadly approach by far the most dynamic one. It's almost as if this game is trying to make killing people more appealing on purpose. I wonder why. Either way, after a little bit of pest control, the duo finally make it to the market, a center of trade controlled by the Hansa, also known as the Commonwealth of the Ring Line. They're a trading federation comprised of stations that, due to their favorable position in the metro, quickly became rich and powerful first through trade, then through war, and later through trade war. Sound familiar? After a long conflict against the local communist faction, they were able to establish the Hansa Ring, which gave them quick access to trade with the entire metro, de facto making them the most powerful faction. As it turns out, Bourbon owes more money than he could ever pay to the Hansa guards, so the duo quickly prepares to go through the station as fast as possible, to avoid the return of Bourbon's enemies. After some quick thinking, he is able to make some unspecified arrangements with the local guards and they are able to escape to the surface in the nick of time, which conveniently transitions us into another staple of the series, the outside. In the Metro games, the outside has always been treated in an interesting way, because in theory it should be the most desirable place to be in, seeing as that's where most of us live. In reality though, you're probably safer in the tunnels, with a bandit breathing down your neck than you are in the bones of Moscow, where even the air is deadly. Every time you're here, you're required to have a gas mask on and a few spare filters, which means that as long as you are out there, you're constantly under a timer. Not only that, but every blunt hit you take damages the mask, therefore eventually killing you, unless you manage to find a replacement in time. This makes outside exploration very tense and even impossible if you didn't take enough filters with you. You can even reach a point where you aren't anywhere near the end of the level with no filters left, and the game is happy to soft lock you there, unable to make any progress unless you reset the whole game and learn the lesson for the next time. Realistically though, this is mostly just a theoretical threat. Most areas are full of spare filters, and if push comes to shove, you can just exploit the air system entirely by repeatedly taking your mask on and off. So really, the only threat that the lack of air presents is your inability to properly explore the level. Which is a shame, you know, because there is a whole lot of good loot here. The devils are a very deliberate enemy. Incredibly tough to kill, their attacks consist of sweeping you and taking you for a ride, which potentially results in a one-hit kill sometimes. The thing is that you have to watch this stupid ass animation every single time, and when you already know that you aren't surviving the fall, that's just cruel. The devils aren't necessarily a fun enemy to fight, but as a plot device they are genius, because they add to the feeling of the outside world being terrifying in a very creative way. They can attack you only when you are under open sky, so the game is effectively telling you to behave like someone who hasn't touched grass in 15 years. And this is nice, you know. I feel really seen by this game. After a bit of a tumble with the local wildlife, by which I mean reminding them who stands at the top of the food chain, we finally make it to Dry Station, where Bourbon is finally captured by the bandits who he, unsurprisingly, has history with. After finally getting to him, he has a little glitch which allows him to get what's coming. And right after, a mysterious man appears from the shaft. This is Khan, and he's the reason why you found some bandits impaled to the wall while sneaking around the station. He leads you through one of the most interesting aspects of the game, Ghost Tunnel. Ghost Tunnel is infamous throughout the metro. Few people have the balls to test themselves there, and almost none manage to return. It's a home to mysterious shadows, ghosts of the past which induce terror and insanity on their victims. This is how you get introduced to them. According to Khan, these shadows are the souls of the people who brutally died in the tunnel, either during the apocalypse or shortly after, but nobody really knows. Glukovsky doesn't make it clear in the books either, so the best we can do is speculate. The phenomenon bears a striking resemblance to the nuclear shadows of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which are thought to be created by people and objects who shielded the surrounding architecture from being irradiated and bleached by nuclear fission, in a way etching their last moments in stone forever. A similar concept is applied to the shadows of the metro, except they aren't just locked in there spatially but temporally as well, being forced to live their final moments over and over again. So in a way, the shadows are a representation of both the unthinkable dimensions of destruction caused by nuclear weapons and a metaphor for the isolation that the metro creates. There is nothing beyond this. You cannot leave while you're alive, and you especially cannot leave once you die. And as Khan puts it,
Heaven, hell, and purgatory were atomized as well. So when a soul leaves the body, it has nowhere to go and must remain here, in the metro.
it's quite difficult to create terror in a shooter like this, especially when the player character just single-handedly took down an entire legion of monsters or armed men. One way to do it is through psychological means, to create a source of fear that you can't just shoot with guns. A kind of fear that is mostly in your head, despite the fact that you are under no real threat to speak of.
Light work, no reaction.
Fortunately, Ghost Tunnel is just a teaser for this kind of horror that Metro would be capable of, both later on in this game, but especially in the sequel. For example, a bit earlier, you are subjected to a more subtle form of horror, such as the effects deeply embedded within the sound mix of some buildings.
Disgusting!
These are the type of sounds you are probably used to associating with apartments, so it may take some time to register what is weird about the sound of running water in a building half of which has been missing for the past 20 years. And when that realization hits you, there is no escaping it. For now though, you still have the guidance of Khan, who is able to answer some questions but raises even more in the process. He explains that some kind of battle took place in this tunnel, which isn't really explained in the game, but in the book it's revealed that he took part in the battle for Polis, the capital of the Metro, a notoriously brutal war, probably taking place sometime during the 2020s. Despite all of that, Khan remains one of the most mysterious characters in the game. He knows things he isn't supposed to, and in one way or another can interact with the dead. Or it could very well be that he is completely out of his mind. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. An interesting theory I've heard is that he is either a hallucination or a mental construct created by the Dark Ones. But the rest of the game kills this hypothesis pretty quickly, since he is mentioned multiple times by the others. Interesting character though still. However, soon after you get separated from him as well. Khan stays behind to help with the defense of Curse Station, which has been having the Nosalis problem for a very long time now. Artium makes his way to the smithy, where he is supposed to meet one of Khan's friends, Andre the blacksmith. As it turns out, however, the station is under communist control, and as such, nothing bad ever happens there. The revolutionary force did try to kill me for the crime of existing, but I deserved it anyway. Andre the blacksmith makes the necessary arrangements to smuggle you into the front line of the battle, raging between the Red Line and the Fourth Reich. Good one, game. Don't you just love it when your games put before you an Easter egg you've already seen 200 or 300 times? While the people upstairs are lamenting about having to eat cyanide pills in case they get captured by the fucking Nazis. Doesn't ruin the mood at all.
What? But God forbid suicide.
Eventually, just as we're about to escape, we're captured by the Nazis, who waste a ridiculous amount of time before pulling the trigger, allowing you to be Ranger Ex Machina out of the situation.
One thing I like about the bad guys, there's always a lot of discussion before they get around to pulling the trigger.
Being aware about it doesn't make it any more okay, game. This is going to be your first proper introduction to the Rangers, ever since Hunter in the beginning. You show them Hunter's dog tags, and they agree to help you go to Polis. The Rangers are the closest faction to what can be considered as the good guys in the Metro. They are made up of a relatively small number of people, owing to the strict hiring procedures, and as such they have gathered a bit of a reputation in the Metro factions, some believing them to be superhuman even. They work independently of the other main factions, and their self-assigned mission is to keep the Metro safe from outside and inside invaders. Their leader is Miller, the very same man Artyom was tasked with finding in the beginning of his journey, and these two are Pavel and Ullman. Pavel promises Artyom he will get him to Polis, and they get on the rail car. Before that though, if you take the smallest detour, you can find a pair of night vision goggles. They are powered by your main battery and can fully illuminate the darkness without giving your position away. They're also the reason why most of my footage after this looks like this, so that's nice. Next is pretty much a shooting gallery. I don't have much to say about this, so we'll just move on. At the end of that little misadventure, Pavel is killed by Nosalis, making him the second person having been killed while escorting Artyom. We still forge on though, as we always do, towards our next destination, Black Station, which is the same one we're supposed to rendezvous with Ullman in. And on the way to that, we come across Hole Station, which is on the brink of being overrun by Nosalis. Artyom offers his help, but a psychic attack finally overwhelms the defenses. He wakes up to a desolated frontline, with only the commander being alive enough to entrust us his final wish: go to the surface and broadcast a message to Polis. This is the first side mission you're gonna get, and it's not too large of a detour anyway, so let's accept it. While exploring the desolate Hole Station, you come across Sasha, a little boy mourning the death of his uncle, later revealed to be the son of the station leader. Artyom takes him on his back and traipses on. I have seen people hate on this part, but I think it's pretty nice. Its kinks mostly come from the fact that the enemies here are completely insufferable and the one-hit kill holes in the ground, but Sasha himself is quite useful. He may make Artyom much slower and the controls much floatier, but he also shouts out enemies where they appear, and is a nice addition, despite being voiced by the same actor as every other kid in the game.
I'll have to help you, or we'll both get eaten.
However, most importantly, the story uses him to make a point about the kids in the Metro. You may wonder how they see the world, since they haven't had the chance to see the surface yet, what they're afraid of, what they dream of. You are shown glimpses of this previously, when the kids are drawing monsters instead of Sonic or something. To be honest, I brushed it off as an interesting nicety before, but now the game reveals a much more profound point to make about the kids in the Metro.
That's the sky, isn't it? It's like a painted ceiling. I'll be famous. I saw the sky.
You merely adopted to this shit, but they were born in it. They're not afraid of monsters. It is their normal down here. Where a lip-tart kid of today would have filled his vegan diapers, Sasha over here is straight up guiding you through the level, either oblivious to or accepting the risk he's in. It may just sound like a small interaction in a small level, but it's exactly touches like that create the impression that there is something worth fighting for here. That the Metro is not just a bunch of crazy people trying to kill each other all of the time. After some interesting platforming, you make it to where the few survivors have retreated, and then out into the surface again, which this time is infested by the Nazis. I'm not going to bore you with this part, so we will just move on. The bottom line is, after escaping the Nazis, you meet Ullman once again, and from here it's a straight shot to Polis. Ah yes, finally, here we are, the capital of your world, and the final destination of Artyom's journey. As it turns out, police is run by a bunch of, and I quote, useless pussy-ass bitches, who did believe what Artyom told them, but basically responded with, damn, that's tough. Good luck, by the way. However, the leader, Miller, being aware of the threat that the Dark Ones pose, suggests a different plan. Somewhere in Moscow, there is an operational nuclear facility called D6, with enough weaponry to erase the Dark Ones' hive out of the map. The problem is that we don't know where this facility is, but we can learn it, if we get into the library and steal a map. And there is a very specific reason why I use the word steal here. Hello? Good monkey. Oh shit! Do you get it, by the way? Library, source of knowledge, home to terrifying monsters called librarians who are hiding the key to restarting the apocalypse. I don't think I need to explain the symbolism here. The librarians are basically the TikTok girls of Metro, in that if you don't stare at them, they get really offended, and sometimes the same happens even if you do stare at them. By the way, this mechanic doesn't exist in the book, they just made it up for this game, and you got to appreciate the extra mile they went to with the animations once you look at the librarians for long enough. I remember the first time I went through the library being completely petrified with fear, but the reality is that enemies here have very clear rules. All you need to do is not rush it. And if you feel your patience running thin, nothing is really stopping you from just killing them all, with your massive arsenal you must have collected by now. I don't mean this as a compliment, by the way. You've been shooting shit for the entire journey until here, so I would have really appreciated it if the game made the librarians much tougher or just didn't allow the player to have enough ammo in the first place. Look, even if you have all the ammo maxed out once you enter here, I suggest that you just pretend you don't and play the level the way it was probably meant to be played. There are some truly tense moments here, like when you're staring at a librarian and at the same time hearing the footsteps of another at your side, being unable to turn and look at them because you know for a fact that the one in front of you will make you into minced meat once you do. It's great, I love it. And it doesn't really overstay its welcome either. After some challenges, Artyom makes it to the basement of the library and finally gets a hold of the documents they need to find D6. After joining your brothers in a church turned base for the Rangers, a small group heads to the military facility to activate it and end the threat of the Dark Ones for good. After fighting what I can only assume to be a fetish or something, at last you manage to reactivate the nuclear reactor powering D6, and all that is left now is to find a vantage point high enough and nuke them fuckers. So as we make it up the tower, you might be asking, this seems like quite a philosophical game. Doesn't it have a problem with you using the same exact weapons that brought humanity almost to extinction on a sentient species? And my answer to that is, I never mentioned the Dark Ones are sentient. Stop spoiling my video. Well. Now that cat is out of the bag, I suppose I'm gonna have to admit that I didn't tell you everything there is to know about the Dark Ones. So far, I have described your interactions with them as malevolent psychic attacks, usually done to weaken a group of people before a horde of Nosalises tears into them. But I lied. Artyom gets these visions throughout the game, which slowly go from being barely comprehensible to a direct message relayed to Artyom.
Wicked phenomenon, yes? But, you know, it's not any more evil than, say, fire. It all depends on your point of view. Try to get a better understanding of things before you make your judgment.
It turns out that all of these visions weren't just mushroom-induced delirium states, but rather a genuine attempt of communication from the Dark Ones, which they tried on the few other people with non-ideal results. Artyom, however, is familiar with the Brainrot, and he can decipher it, something that was made painfully clear to you ever since you reached Riga in the beginning. But on the other hand, you also see the destruction caused by the Dark One's psychic influence firsthand. The sight of people dying, or worse, thanks to the moments of stupefaction caused by the Dark Ones, should hardly leave your mind. But to be really honest with you, we don't really know why this happened. Was it intentional? And if it was, why don't the Dark Ones try to kill Artyom as well, but are instead trying to convince him to forfeit his mission? They even take you to the past in some select moments to remind you of what the world was like before the nukes fell. Are you really willing to do the same to creatures you don't even understand? So there is enough ambiguity here that if you stop and pay attention, could make you question your mission entirely. And this is where the multiple endings come in, and with it, the morality system. Metro 2033 has two endings. The good ending sees Artyom deciding not to shoot the missile targeting system from the tower, thus not allowing the strike to go through. And the bad ending, which, much like the book, sees the Dark Ones completely destroyed. except in this one Artyom doesn't seem to question himself too much. What ending you get depends on your actions throughout the game, as well as the final decision you have to make. So far, when you did certain things, you may have noticed a flash of light. This adds a morality point and steers you towards the good ending. The morality systems in the Metro games always works like this. There is very rarely an instance when you pick between an obviously good and an obviously bad action. Your morality score is always hidden and is a consequence of a way of playing and not a conscious decision to pick the good or the bad ending, at least for the first playthrough, because this is a game that you are probably expected to finish only once anyway. The game rewards you for playing in a more enlightened way, i.e. the way Artyom would. Except the problem here is that Artyom did play this game in the books, and even with the added context there, he still didn't decide to spare the Dark Ones. So you are basically given here the option to do something that didn't even occur to Artyom after a whole game of playing like he would. I don't hate the endings of 2033. In fact, it's not completely unfeasible that he would have come to his senses before pulling his trigger at the end. Or maybe he needed to see the missiles to fall to truly understand what he was doing. Who knows? So basically what I'm trying to say is that the endings have one very small problem that could even be a non-issue, but I'm gonna try to fix it anyway. You can't stop me, you clicked on this video 15 minutes ago. Instead of having one ending where Artyom kills the Dark Ones and one when he doesn't, I suggest that this game should have had one ending where the Dark Ones manage to stop Artyom and trick him into falling off the bridge, and the other one where he completes his mission. In this way we can avoid the banal distinction between the good and bad ending, but most importantly we can tie the endings directly to the morality system, because as the Dark Ones saw Artyom give to the poor, spare people he could have easily killed, save prisoners, be friendly to other Dark Ones, and display a genuine enjoyment of the finer things in life, they believed that in the end he would forgive them. However, Artyom never intended to give up on his mission. In the end, he fires the missiles anyway, catching the Dark Ones by surprise, who do manage to give Artyom a final message. It is here that he understands the crime he committed, but now it's too late. On the flip side, if you decide to mow down hordes of people, steal and stumble like an oaf for the whole game, the Dark Ones understand quickly enough that they are dealing with a psychopath and use their full psychic powers to put an end to his designs before he is able to set up the targeting system. Thus, the Dark Ones survive, but Artyom dies, making it a more ambiguous ending. This, however, would still be completely counter to how the Dark Ones are portrayed in the book, since they never outright try to kill Artyom, even after he already commits to his decision. Either way, both the endings and the morality system are a nice addition to the game, which means I essentially wasted a whole page of my script talking about something that is essentially just a tiny nitpick. So instead of embarrassing myself further by extending this giant ass script even more, I might as well finish up real quick and give my... In the end, Metro 2033 is a very solid effort. In fact, I would go as far as to say that it's a great one, especially for a first game. The shooting feels smooth even to this day, despite some clunky animations, and the graphics still hold up, even though the remaster came out over 10 years ago now. This allows the atmosphere to be as thick as in the book, which I really appreciate, though I would definitely have less in the way of Easter eggs. The only two things which have considerably aged are the weapon sounds and the acting, to be honest. It's not like it's bad or anything, just kind of dated. They were really budget constrained on this one, so I'm not gonna be too harsh on that front. Metro 2033 to me feels like a demo, but I don't mean that as an insult. It's more like a strong foundation, a proof of concept if you will, for something greater. There are gameplay elements that feel tragically underexplored, like the hentai tentacles, the armored spiders that burn in the light, the librarians, and the shadows in Ghost Station. You get brief glimpses of these during con segments and then they sort of vanish forever. It's not like these ideas are undercooked, they're just squeezed into a game that is surprisingly short. Too short to fully breathe even. Get it? Even the ending feels like a setup, like the game is telling you that it's only the beginning of something much larger, both narratively and mechanically. Oh my god, I think that means I have to make a video about Last Light too.